Alright guys, thanks for stopping by the channel today. Today we're going to be doing a little instructional video on how to do an R&R, which is removal and replace of a small motor on one of these little tiny whoop style quadcopters. And this is a really small little 3.7 volt quadcopter that has a good motor in it right here. So I'm going to harvest this motor, and I'm actually going to be reinstalling it in the recipient. So donor and recipient. We're going to be actually reinstalling it in this quadcopter here. It's the right rear motor right here. This one, sorry about the finger there, I can't really see what I'm doing there. This one right here. So that's what we're going to be working on today. So I'm going to show you guys step by step how to get one of these motors out of here and actually install it in the recipient quadcopter. We'll be right back after this. Alright guys, we're back. Let's get started on this. So the first couple of tools we're going to need to perform this R&R, removal and reinstall, are going to be, first of all, the donor quadcopter. We're going to need a small screwdriver to remove the circuit board from the frame of the quadcopter. And we're going to need some sort of a tool to remove the prop that we're going to be dealing with. And some solder flux, and then our soldering iron all heated up and ready to go. So let's go ahead and get started on this. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove the canopy off this quad. Now on most of these little tiny quads like this, you're going to have two little pins on the bottom of the frame, and I hope this shows up for you guys. So on either side of my index fingers here on the inside, you're going to possibly see two little pins, and all we would have to do at this point is just pry the soft plastic away off of those pins, and then go ahead and remove the canopy and set that aside. Now we are looking at the innards of the quadcopter. We have the receiver board right here. What we're going to need to do is remove this receiver board so we can kind of fish this wire through and then remove the motor. So first thing on the agenda, we're going to have to remove the prop on this side. And I'm just using a little, you can get these pretty much with any quadcopter of this size. Sometimes they include it in the package. I happen to have this one from another quad that I own. And what we're going to do is just basically take this little forked end here and go underneath the prop shaft here between the motor and the actual prop itself, and just kind of gently pry up on that to get that prop out of the way. And once that's out of the way, we can set that aside. Now we can see the actual motor inside of here and the wires that run along the bottom here. So this is the motor we're going to be dealing with. Here's the wires. In order to get these wires out of their little channels that they're pressed into, we're going to have to remove this receiver board. So in order to do that, we're going to take a small Phillips screwdriver, and we have two screws on here. Let's move the antenna out of the way. We have two screws, one on the top and one on the bottom here. So we'll go ahead and remove those. We'll start with the bottom. And you want to have some sort of a receptacle or some safe spot to put these screws if you ever want to reuse them again, because they're so tiny they will tend to end up in parts unknown. We'll go ahead and remove the front one as well now. Get that off of there. And that should pretty much free our circuit board up. Our receiver board should pretty much be freed up and ready to go. So let's go ahead and see if we can lift that off of there gently. There we go. And it is pressed in on small little pins on here, guys, so be careful when you're lifting this. And I will always utilize tools that you have. So this I think will work fine for getting behind the board right here and against the frame, between the frame and the actual board, and just kind of gently prying up on the back side here to get that off of the board. Now we are free and off of the board. So the next thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and desolder. We probably could have left the board in, but I kind of wanted to show you as well how to remove the board should you ever have to replace it. Now you would, in this case, if you had to replace it, you would go ahead and just desolder all these points right here. These are all solder joints for the motors right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you can see that the motors are different color coded for the wires. You have a red and yellow, or I'm sorry, red and blue in the back, and the two front ones, actually the ones adjacent, so on a cross configuration, so directly across, is the same motor wire colors. That's just signifying one direction of spinning. So in other words, when you turn the quadcopter on, when you power it up, these motors will spin one direction, whereas the ones that have the black and the white wires that are directly across from one another will spin the opposite direction. So now you know how to remove the board itself if you ever have to replace that. Again, this is probably something we didn't have to do for this operation, but I did want to show you that just in case. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our hot solder gun, and we're going to go ahead and desolder these two wires right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab a needle nose pliers, and we're going to go ahead and just grab a hold of the wire with the needle nose. So I'm going to use this little pick and kind of separate these two. Sorry about the being in the frame there. Actually get that separated. And looks like the red one is in the back right here, and the blue one's going to be towards the front. So let's go ahead and just move these aside a little bit here so we can get at them without burning either or. Now it's going to come to having a steady hand with your soldering gun. I'm sorry about the focus in and out there, guys. I'm trying to get this where it's going to stay in focus. What I usually do in this case is I'll grab a hold of whatever wire that I'm going to be working with. I have a just a curved nose, needle nose pliers here, so it's got a curved tip on it. And I'll go ahead and I'll grab a hold of the wire that I'm going to be removing, as not to get my bare hands too close to the hot soldering tip, because that's just not fun. And then what we're going to do is I usually use a little bit of flux just to keep that tip nice and hot. And then we're going to go ahead and touch that back solder joint, and that one is free. All it takes is one little touch on there, guys. This is really a super, your soldering irons are going to get really super hot, and that's such a small solder joint down there, you really don't have to do too much else, especially if you're using a paste flux like I usually do. And this is just the Odie brand. I'll show you what I'm using here. This is just the Odie brand number 0.95 lead-free tinning flux. It's lead-free, and there's no smell, and I'm using lead-free solder as well. So some people will say, well, you should be using the leaded solder because it flows better. If you're using the flux, you shouldn't have a problem, and I never have. So we're going to go ahead and get this blue wire out of the way here so we're not burning it. Pull that off to the side a little bit. Now we're going to be working with the red wire. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the red wire, dipping our solder tip into the flux here just to get it cleaned off a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and grab a hold of this red wire, and very carefully, taking good aim, hit that solder joint. And that is it. And that should be free. Yep, and that's free and clear. So now, next step is going to be taking these wires and routing them back through and getting them off the bottom of the frame. So give me 1 second on that, guys. I'll get this thing flipped over and I'll show you exactly what I'm doing here. Alright guys, you can see on the top here, and I'll show you real quickly, of this frame, another good reason to loosen up these, take the screws out and get the circuit board out of the way, is you can get at these little wiring clamps in here. So there's actually molded into the plastic little like fingers in here that hold the wire channels. So you want to move that out of the way, and then just gently, what I did was I used my little needle nose pliers, and I just kind of grabbed it from underneath and pulled it back and out of this little channel right here. You can just barely see that. I think you can see it right here, but you can see the little channel right there, the little hole. Now we can flip it over, and this wire should come free. So we'll just grab our little pick here and go underneath the wires and then pull them back and free. So now we are free and clear of the circuit board. Next thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and remove the wires from this little channel on here. And you can see there's a small little channel that these wires are clipped into. Basically that's going to be the same idea. You want to grab your needle nose pliers, and very gently, guys, you don't want to be monkey fisting this or hand fisting this at all. Just pull those free. Now we can take the motor out. So now they're free and out of that channel. The other next thing we have to do is go ahead and remove this motor. And the best way to do that is take something plastic. Now I'm not an advocate of using a whole lot of metal tools anywhere near circuit boards. There's a lot of chips on here that are programmed, computer programmed. And what can happen is if you short something out on that board, you can actually destroy the board itself or destroy components on there. And quite frankly, when you just start destroying these small components on here that are wave soldered on, you're better off just buying a whole new board. And boards for this are probably right around, oh, I don't know, $8 to $10, I would think, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you can avoid all of that by not touching a whole lot of metal to the circuit board itself. So I'm going to use a plastic tool right here, and let me see if I can get at that without shutting this video down. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this drawer open or not. Let's see here. Okay. Yep, I definitely got at it here. So I've got a multitude of different tools that I use for cell phone repairs. I do cell phone repairs on the side. I was working for a company that trained me to repair iPhones and iPads, screen replacements, component replacements. So I have some of these type of tools lying about that I can use for this. Now this may not be the ideal tool. I could probably use a different plastic spudger for this, or a nylon spudger. But what we're going to want to do, guys, is push up on this motor to get it out of the actual motor cavity or motor pod here. So what we're going to do is just from the bottom right here, very gently press up, holding onto the frame. We're going to press up on the motor, and you can see it coming out the top there. Now we should be able to grab it. In most cases, you can grab these at this point, kind of twist them and pull them up as you go. Very gently pulling it up. So you want to make sure that you're routing the wire through the hole right there, that you're not snagging it or tearing it on anything. And now we have our motor free. So our donor quadcopter can be set aside for now. And this is what our motor is going to look like. This is a little 5 or 6 millimeter motor. I'm not quite sure the size, but this is what we want. This is the right motor that we're going to be using and installing on our SICK quadcopter. So give me 1 second. I'll get the other one set up and in frame, and I'll be right back, guys. Alright guys, I've already got the prop taken off of the donor quadcopter here, and just for sake of instruction, I'm going to show you again how to desolder this stuff, how to get these wires out of the way, and we'll go ahead from there, and we'll go ahead and reinstall this motor, or take this motor out, and then reinstall our good motor, our known good motor, into the quadcopter, power it up, and go for a little flight around the room. So let's go ahead and get this one off of here. Again, it's going to be the same situation. Now, I did not take the screws out of the circuit board here. I left them intact. And we're going to go ahead and just grab a hold of our little wire here and gently hold on to that, and kind of putting some little bit of pressure on it so that when we break that solder joint with the heat, the wire will move away from the actual circuit board. So let's go ahead and do this real quickly, real gently here. I'm not quite, let go, there we go. So now we've got that one loose. And just to confirm that, I'll pull it away with my finger, get it out of that way. And we're going to remember that we're looking at it from the back. We're going to have the blue in the back. The blue is going to be the negative, and the red is going to be the positive. So always think of red as being hot or positive. All right, so the blue one, we're going to get that pulled up a little bit here to give ourselves a little bit of a loop to grab onto. And we're going to go ahead and grab that and pull up just a little bit on it. I use my thumb on the corner here. You can see my thumb on the ring of the quadcopter frame here, kind of using it as leverage, pushing and pulling at the same time. And we're going to go ahead and pop this one loose. And there we go. So they are both free now, ready to be removed. So we can get this motor out of the way. And I'm going to show you guys the difference of doing it with the circuit board, with the actual receiver board screws taken out and the board pulled out of the way, as opposed to leaving it all intact and doing it. Same idea with this, guys. You're going to want to go, now in this case we're going to go from underneath. I think would be easier vantage point. And it's always good to have a pick. I'm using a straight one today. I do have curved ones, but I don't think I really need that for today's operation. We're going to go ahead inside here and between the frame, if you guys can see this. We're going to go ahead and grab those wires with the pick and then kind of gently pull them up and out from the top of the circuit board itself. And I should be able to grab them with my fingers and pull them up gently. Alright, and that's pretty much it. So now that these wires are out of the way, you can see on the bottom here, one wire is already out of the way, but there's a small little finger here, or like a little channelway clip that's holding the wires in place so they can be routed. And this one we're just actually going to take and pull from the side here and out of the way of that channel, and we are free and clear with this motor. So now, same way, you don't want to put a lot of metal implements on here. Metal tools are not the greatest to be using, although you did see me with the metal pick here kind of inside there, but I wasn't really touching anything on the motor or the circuit board per se. And you know, truth be known, I should really have a static strap, anti-static strap on when I'm handling any kind of circuit boards. I don't have one handy, so and I've never really had any problems with shorting anything out due to static charge or discharge. So I think we're just going to go ahead and go with it the way we are. We're going to grab our plastic little pry tool here, and the same way on this one, guys, we're going to find a spot on the motor, not over the wires, but a spot on the motor, and just gently but firmly press up on this guy. And this one's fighting me just a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and get a different vantage point on this one here. And same way. Now on here, you want to make sure that when you're pressing on here, if you have to use two hands, that you part these wires out of the way. You don't want to be cutting them with your fingernail or with or any kind of pressure. So being very careful, pressing on just the motor part itself. I can use my thumbnail, and I can also use the spudger on this side or the pry tool on this side and just kind of press forward, and it did move forward. Now this is a really tight fit on this one, guys, so this is going to take a little bit of doing. I'm going to go ahead and grab another tool out of the drawer here. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. Okay, guys, so I've got a plastic spudger, a nylon spudger out here. Basically what we're going to be doing is kind of wedging that between the actual motor pod part of the frame here and against the bottom of the motor, and then kind of rocking it back and forth and pressing it up and out. So I want to make sure that these wires are out of the way and they're not getting crushed while I'm doing this. But basically what we're going to be doing is setting the spudger inside like this. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. You just want to make sure that you're not crushing these wires under the pressure of pushing on this. So fingers like this alongside the motor. You can see how I've got my fingers there alongside the motor, and then actually pressing up against the actual rings themselves and just kind of rocking it back and forth to get that motor to move farther down. And once it's down to a certain point, again, this is pretty tight, so we're going to want to see if we can grab a hold of this firmly but gently and twist it. And that's really in there, guys. So let me go ahead and grab some oil here. I have some 3-in-1 oil I'm actually going to put in here and see if that doesn't help. So give me 1 second, guys. All right, now that I've got that oil in there, I think it'll be okay for us to go ahead and just use a needle nose pliers and grab the end of this and pull it out. The motor's bad anyway, so there really is no need to be so delicate with this. So everything I said before about not worrying about crushing wires, just disregard that. This motor has to come out of here, so we're going to grab it with the needle nose pliers and then squeeze it as tight as we can without crushing it, and then rock it back and forth and pull it at the same time, and we're out of the way now. So basically, here's our bad one, and here is our good one right here. So essentially what we're going to be doing is taking this one, taking the bad one, and putting it in the bad parts pile over here, and the good one is going to be placed into action. So what we're going to be doing is taking the wires, feeding them down through the top of the motor pod, and they will fall out this little hole on the bottom. You guys catching this on video here. And then we're going to press the motor in, which should be an easier to accomplish at this point because we're not dealing with the stickiness of a dry motor against the plastic here. So now we've got our wires pretty much where we want them. We're going to go ahead and route those now, and I'm going to go ahead and open these up a little bit, unravel them just a little bit, so we have kind of what I call a service loop that we're able to connect them a little bit easier. Okay, now routing them is pretty much the same way. We're going to go down the motor pod here, and then we're going to clip these in, and I'll show you what I'm doing here so you can see. There's a little clip, and I showed you guys this before, and I hope it's coming out on the camera here, but there's a little clip right here. You maybe can't see it, but we're going to have to get this underneath that clip and route those wires back up on top and get them onto the actual circuit board. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and I'll show you exactly how that looks when I'm done. Alright guys, I've got the wires routed now underneath this little tab here, and you could maybe make it out right here. I've got them stuffed down in this channel and then routed up to the top. And if we turn the quad over and we can see our circuit board, I've actually gone ahead and I've started the solder process off camera. It's just a little easier that way. I still have the blue one to get on here yet, but you can see, hopefully you can see this, the red wire right here. What we're looking for on this, guys, is a hot solder joint. So you want to make sure that it's got a nice shiny solder joint on there. That just tells you that the solder flowed properly and is going to result in a good connection for that wire onto this board. That's critical. You don't want to get this thing all soldered up, put back together, battery in it, and start it up and find out that you have a cold solder joint there and you're not getting your motor's not spinning. So you want to make sure that you're doing this as carefully as possible so you're not burning things, and you want to make sure that you're also applying enough heat to these little solder blobs on here that you're able to get a nice hot solder joint. So I'm going to go ahead and get that other one soldered up off camera, and I'll bring it back and I'll be back and I'll show you guys the end result. Alright guys, so we've got both of our solder joints on here now, both of our wires soldered onto the board. Everything looks pretty good. Now it's just going to be a matter of putting everything back together, putting a battery in, and doing a quick flight test. That's pretty much all there is to it. The hardest part about this, guys, is making sure that you're taking your time and you're not melting anything on here. You're not touching the hot solder pen to the circuit board, and you're not melting your frame while you're doing this. It takes a little bit of a steady hand. But if you take your time, anything can be done if you put your mind to it. Just take your time with it. Don't try to rush it. And I would recommend not doing this behind the camera because it makes it that much harder. So that's pretty much all for this part of the video. I'm going to pause right here, put the canopy on, throw a battery in, and go ahead and see if we can get this thing to fly. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. Alright guys, we're back, and as you can see, I've already got a battery installed in here. I've got everything put back together, the canopy back on, and the prop installed. Let's go ahead and bind this transmitter to the quadcopter and see if that motor spins or not. That's going to be our deciding factor right here. So we'll get the transmitter on. We're going to go up and down to bind, and we're going to go ahead and start the let's do a compass calibration, and now we're going to go ahead and start the motors. And you can see, in fact, it does work. So I think this was a success, guys. Really easy to do if you take your time. Again, the main thing that you're going to want to be careful of is not burning yourself or damaging any wires or any circuit boards or any part of the actual frame of the quadcopter when you're doing this. Pretty easy to do. If you guys have liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, guys. It helps me out a lot. Hit that bell as well so you get all of my content going forward. That's pretty much it. We'll see you guys in the next one. God bless the Republic.